Our next speaker is Deborah Kelly. Deborah has been the designer of the community childcare magazine Rattler for nearly 10 years. As creative director at Our Media, she oversees the design of community childcare's annual reports, posters, flyers and books. And she drew the images which you can see on our anniversary materials, including the t-shirt that I'm currently wearing. But she has another life. For the better part of 3 decades, Deborah has created a body of artworks across media that have been seen around Australia and in many other countries. She won the 2009 Fisher's Ghost Award, the Screen Grab International New Media Art Award, the 2012 Albury Art Prize, and the 2013 Redlands Art Prize Audience Award. Often politically motivated, her artworks explore ideas of power in all its manifestations, highlighting popular prejudices and hidden histories. Many of her best-known works have occurred in the public realm on highly visible canvases, including billboards, bus shelters, postcards, human bodies, and projection onto clouds. She's right now beginning a humongous collaborative work for the 2014 Biennial of Sydney, which is to be exhibited at the Art Gallery of New South Wales from March. Deborah is also the designer of our artwork on our merchandise, so don't miss the opportunity to have some beautiful pieces for yourself. I'd like to welcome Deborah with her speech on the collisions of my worlds, A Trip.
Forgive me, I was so nervous about putting this together that I didn't get here in advance enough to test my imagery. And actually the imagery is so much more important than what I'm going to say that I wonder if we could turn the lights off so that the pictures are brighter. Is that possible? And could you please help me? Okay. Actually, there's a bit I want to say before the pictures come up, and that is, it's like so many contemporary people, I have 2 lives. Some people combine big work lives as well as motherhood or fatherhood. Some pilots are poets. Me, I'm a creative director and also an artist. There are many ways in which those different lives diverge and others where they cross over. And actually doing work for community childcare shows me that the contours of my different lives map each other very closely in many ways. And that is largely thanks to Eddie Djokovic, Leanne Gibbs, and Lisa Bryant encouraging me to be genuinely creative in the work that I do for community childcare, which is a great privilege. So I started actually putting this together to tell you how different my different lives are, but it turned out that when I wrote it, I proved to myself how much they have in common. Now I actually have no idea how this thing works. They promised you some offence for the day. It might be from me. So this is one of my really earliest works, which was a cartoon from 1983, probably before half of you had left early education and care. Probably some of you were not even born. So I was a teenage revolutionary feminist cartoonist. And this is one of my very first pieces that was published. Quite a lot of people seem to really like it. Me and some friends I guess my whole work is about trying to be part of building a culture I can bear to live in. So me and some friends set up a dance club actually that had childcare, free childcare by qualified educators until 3 a.m. Which was pretty hard to do actually, and it meant that our entire profits went to pay the childcare people. But you know, it was still really great. It was such a great thing to do, and to ensure that especially single mothers could go out dancing until really late and not worry and not be paying babysitters, but you know, that their children were actually being really properly looked after. So that was an early feminist experiment in bringing together pleasure and politics. And I guess my whole life is really about that. So if somebody could tell me which one of these things is going to advance. That one. Okay, thank you. So I'll just give you a little introduction to the ways that my lives have converged. One of the very first issues of Rattler that I designed, nearly 10 years ago, featured an interview with a very, very young woman who was setting up a conference about childcare and its issues in Perth. And in her interview, she said, childcare, early education and care, only really faces two problems: capitalism and patriarchy. And it was so exciting to see a young woman especially saying those things, and to think that those are the twin forces of organised power which do beset us in all aspects of our lives, and in everybody's attempts to find justice. So I have had the privilege of bringing my ethos as a worker for cultural change to bear on both my worlds. I believe, I'm sorry, I did write some of this down and I failed to memorise it as well, and it's not even poetry. I believe that a culture of resistance to these two little issues, as identified by that young woman all those years ago, can be built and strengthened by treating people as if they're smart and switched on, and as if they want fierce beauty in everyday life. And are willing to work in whatever quiet way they can for a better world for us all, children included. So, as I said, I'm trying to build a culture that I can bear to live in, and that invites more people to participate in public discourse and in understanding what power is and how it works and whose interests it serves. I hope to, with my work, invite others to participate in this struggle by showing it to be rich in diversity, optimism, complexity and pleasure. So now I'm just going to show you some works. This is a piece made taking the words out of John Howard's mouth when he took power and said he refused to subscribe to a black armband view of history. He said it so many times it started sounding true. My friend Liz Connor, who's a cultural historian in Melbourne, said, I will subscribe to a black armband view of history. So I said, well, I'll make them. So we made these black armbands to show our solidarity and our grief at the ongoing dispossession of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and we managed to convince the body shop to sell them for us. And they didn't take a single cut. We sold 25,000, with which we raised money for the Yorta land claim in Victoria, which was really incredibly powerful. And so amazing to see people walking around with this, taking the words out of the Prime Minister's mouth and putting it on their arm, appearing in public in this way, kind of empowered and activated. And Nicole Kidman and Benita Marbo all went to the AFI Awards. And that's the best headline anything I've ever done has ever had. Glamorous activists winning the PR war. I totally love that. Oh, that's the other direction. So years after that, I was invited to make a work for the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras. I said I want to make a work about heterosexual privilege, and they said, why would you do that? And I said, because we are surrounded and we never talk back, and heterosexual people never have to think of themselves in the same way that white people never have to think of what that means, what kinds of privileges are packed into that state. So I wanted to articulate it in a way that was kind of funny and charming, but at the same time ferocious. And some people did tell me that they needed counselling after seeing some of these works. They were in bus shelters all over Sydney, and they've been in a lot of other cities since then, and now they're in like textbooks, and they've been translated into, what's that language? Where they, in Skopje? Macedonian. They're being translated into Macedonian right now. I'm just showing you some of them. I have recently had the opportunity to... Oh, by the way, remember Liz Connor, whose idea it was to do the black armband? That is her. With her actual partner and the child, they had the conventional way. And they are great activists for the liberation of humanity. So, by the way, I had an opportunity to print some of these works as postcards recently, and I've brought some for you if you would like them. They're laminated, which I'm afraid means that they can't be recycled, but it also means they will never die. So you can keep them forever, although I must say I really hope they become obsolete before forever is up. That's the same Liz Connor, with her same genuine partner. I love the expression on those people. So they were in bus shelters throughout Sydney in 2001, which was so fun getting to see, after the armbands, it really changed my life, getting to see critical work in public that was, I would see people standing around these bus shelters shouting at each other. It was so exciting to be part of activating a public in that way. So, in this one, I obviously was trying to get American Express to arrest me. They kept a dignified silence, unfortunately. I just want to tell you that no heterosexuals were harmed. In the same year that these works went into the public realm, a lot of people escaped from Villawood, people who are incarcerated for seeking asylum, which is actually legal. There were dogs out searching for them. I went to hear the wonderful anthropologist Ghassan Haj speaking at a conference. I'm sorry, these things are so all over the place, but you'll see that they have a common desire to argue for justice. Anyway, so Ghassan Haj said he didn't want to talk about what he was supposed to be talking about. He wanted to talk about all of those asylum seekers who had escaped from incarceration in Villawood and were being hunted throughout Sydney with dogs. And he wanted to put a sign on his window saying, "You can come and hide at my house." And I thought, everybody wants that sign. So I raced home and I made this very simple sign that just looks like it isn't at a time. And of course, it was on dial-up, so it was a 279k PDF, which took forever to upload to email to every single person I'd ever met. But still, it was a week well wasted, I guess. Because within a few days, it was all over Australia. It was like 20 or 30 websites, many religious, like the Uniting Church and some Anglican churches used it, made it downloadable from their websites, and other people who knew the stuff about CC that you could send anyone to. They really spread it, so it was all over the country within a few days. And these things really kept changing me to see that how people really longed to defy injustice. I mean, obviously, if you were hiding refugees in your garage, you probably didn't have this on the window. But you at least weren't looking like you consented with your silence. And that's what this work was about. And the continued racist denigration of people who came here to seek asylum from tyranny and war continued that year. The Tampa happened, remember? And I had only just moved to Sydney and I was frankly quite lonely. So I started scouting around for people to work with me on talking back to, the ascendant discourse of legitimizing racism and hatred. So I kept being asked to give talks and stuff, but I used them to recruit people to work with. And I got all these really amazingly cool young people with technology together, and we started making things that attempted to articulate the inheritance of the White Australia policy, what it means to be the descendants of boat people, which we wanted to say, taking up from the activist Rebecca Bale Wingfield, who is a Kokata Arabana woman, who called all of us at a conference who weren't Aboriginal boat people. We wanted to bring that idea to life, that if we weren't Indigenous, we are in fact boat people. And anybody who wants to say they're a plain person, there's a room for smart asses. Anyway, so the first thing we did to try to bring this to life was the idea of who's a boat person. We made this, and a genuine collaboration is everybody egging each other on to be more bold and more amazing. So we first made the image, and then somebody said, let's project it somewhere, and then somebody else said, what about on the Opera House? And somebody else went, let's just do it. So, but it's a big secret, okay? So we just got a little 35mm projector of slides, totally obsolete technology even then, and a little generator hidden in a handbag. We all wore black. We went to the Opera House in the middle of the night, all dressed in black, pretending we didn't know each other, sneaking up to the top of the steps. And we'd all promised we wouldn't tell anybody, but we all had told a few friends. And so by the time we got to the top plane of the Opera House, there were more than 100 people there. And we cranked up our little generator and plugged it into the slide projector and put the tiny little 35mm slide in, which had cost this whole work, 15-metre billboard on the Opera House, cost $38. Which was, not nothing. But still, it was pretty cheap. But the reason that we were stopped was because we were so excited that it worked. We were all screaming. And the security guards came running to us and said, you can't do this, this is a public space. But one of us said, we are the public. We are, aren't we? I might have brought too many pictures to show you because I'm a little bit overexcited. So perhaps I'm going to race through some things. Other direction. So boat people have made a whole lot of pretty stupid works in public, trying to articulate some of the themes of our day, trying to bring the ideas of the legitimization of racism to unpack them in a public way. I wanted to point out to the entire federal government of John Howard, who all claim to be Christians, that Jesus was in fact a refugee at one stage as a baby. So we actually made this to project onto the Opera House, but we were stopped in advance at that time. Then we thought, how do Australians continue to forget the importance sorrows and our history. Alcohol. So we made beer. I mean, these are the labels from our beer, which are drawn by one of our members, Safdar Ahmed, who is a really great drawer. So we made an ordinary beer and a blonde beer, as you'll see. She'll be white. Very popular. Weirdly, weirdly popular. See, people actually drank it. Then we started mucking around with wrapping our heads in the flag because we wanted to really... We became so dismayed by the continuing discourse that demonises asylum seekers. We couldn't think of anything to say. So we just started appearing with our heads wrapped in the flag in various places, and we asked other people to do that with us sometimes. By the way, that is my dad in the middle with his head not wrapped. He said, Deborah, every good artwork has a note of dissent. So yeah, there's my dad doing a little bit of dissent. And by the way, he is in the big work that I'm doing for the Biennale. My dad, who's 86, is going to be nude in the Art Gallery of New South Wales. He is so thrilled. Here's a whole other work that I made thinking about when a particular federal government suddenly discovered that global warming did exist, but only in terms of justification for nuclear power, and selling our uranium to countries who had not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. I must say, I wish that I could have thought of a snappier way to say that, but this is as best as I could do. But the image worked quite well. It was produced as posters and postcards and stuff like that, and you can still download it from Flickr if you look for it, at really high res and print it yourself, as I really love that free distribution capacity of the internet. Here is a work I made to drive Fred and Al crazy. I made it as a little recipe card that bolder friends than I slipped into women's magazines in news agencies. Can you read it from there? Yeah. Okay, so because remember Fred and Al was trying to have Muslim schoolgirls banned from wearing the hijab to school in the interest of unity, and then John Howard said, when he was asked about it on public radio, he said, well, Fred and Al's a very good friend of mine, and I know he speaks for a lot of Australians. And women were having their veils torn from their heads in public streets, and other kinds of very ugly violence, which I could only respond to with stupidity. As I said, this is a fart cushion for the mind. And that's what people made with it. I encountered people who were just having little workshops making these matchboxes. They had no idea that it was an artwork or that an artist had done it. It was like they just wished it existed, and then there it was, which was so thrilling to me that, that I wasn't in front of my work, I was behind it. So I got to make this gigantic work for the Museum of Contemporary Art, who asked me what I was thinking about, and I was thinking about the rise of activist religious people, especially our super Catholic health minister at that time, who is now our Prime Minister. So obviously I can only think of stupid things to say about that, so this is a gag on that old, the joke. Did you hear about the dyslexic, agnostic, insomniac stayed up all night wondering if there was a dog? And I just have to have a little break, because I know this is all very hard going, and tell you the matching joke that goes with that. Did you hear about the dyslexic devil worshipper? He sold his soul to Santa. Anyway, even though this is kind of a stupid gag, I had very gigantic ambitions for it, so I wanted to take those words and project them onto clouds, and I got the biggest projector in the world to do that with. And I made some posters that you could download from my website. Some of them more respectful than others. But anyway, so I got this gigantic projector as big as a rocket on the roof of the MCA, and on the first night that I wanted to project onto clouds, there were none, and I just had to project onto the ground, which was very disappointing. But my mum was there, and she said, "It's all right, you're projecting onto the roof of hell." And I just didn't know that my mum had such an interesting cosmology as that would be. But I got to keep that gigantic projector on the roof of the MCA for 10 weeks, and on some nights there were the low flat clouds that I needed to project on, which weren't actually raining because that makes your projector explode, and that's bad. And you could hear people in Circular Quay screaming. Somebody told me they saw somebody fall to their knees. Absolutely peak moments as an artist in my whole life, where people would see my work and not go, "Oh, art." They'd go, "It's a miracle." Oh God, now I'm going to tell you about a totally different thing, which is a memorial for the 20th anniversary of the massacre at Tiananmen Square in Beijing, which was very close to me because when that happened in 1989, is somebody going to shoot me or something when I go over time? Which is when? Okay. So it was very close to me and the people that I was with at that time, because in 1988, 89, we were on the streets a lot arguing with our government about how to celebrate the bicentenary of the invasion of this country. And so when those Chinese students started arguing with their government about some things that were related about how history is understood, then they were like our colleagues. They were students like us, but their government killed them. And it was so shocking, especially, I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember, when Bob Hawke, Prime Minister at that time, the butchest Prime Minister in history, I'd like to say, went onto public national television to talk about it, what had happened to those students, and he started crying. And he had a totally terrible crying disaster and he couldn't stop crying, and he didn't have a hanky. Remember? And he had this terrible snot disaster. And to see the Prime Minister on television crying, couldn't stop crying, and then having that brainwave that he hadn't talked to his government about, where he went, "And all of the Chinese students currently studying here can stay." Remember? And so suddenly we became enormously more Chinese. And that's a legacy of that time. Anyway, so it felt very close to me. So when I met a young Chinese woman who told me that Tiananmen Square had not happened, that it in fact had been concocted by the Americans with Photoshop to make the Chinese government look oppressive, I was like, oh my God, is it really actually possible that history can be changed that thoroughly in the minds of people, so erased? I mean, I know it happens here to some extent, but it was so incredible that it could be turned into a propaganda opportunity like that. I went to YouTube to have a look at that man who held off the tanks in Tiananmen Square after the massacre. I looked at it over and over again to see if it could possibly have been concocted. And the more I looked at it, the more I thought, they didn't even have Photoshop in 1989. And besides that, that man is kind of dancing. He's dancing with the tank. He's holding it off. And anyway, I employed a choreographer to build a dance based on the steps that he took holding off those tanks. And we made instructional videos. They're on YouTube. You can easily find them. It's called Tankman Tango. We made those videos in 4 languages. They went all around the world. And people on the anniversary of Tiananmen Square, a thing that no government in the world wanted to remember because of the growing client relationship with China, who does not want it remembered. So this is a people's memorial. People made this memorial themselves in more than 20 cities around the world, doing that dance this is people in Sydney practicing the night before. So it happened all over the world, and that's my friend Takim showing you how to do the dance. Anyway, have a look at it, it's on YouTube, it's called Tank Man Tango. Oh, and now I'm going to fine art. Here is a whole lot of collages where I'm trying to think about how women are represented. And here is a work called The Miracles, which thinks about the daily miracle of IVF and other forms of immaculate conception, which are now surrounding us. I really thought of it because of the old Pope saying rude things about same-sex families, and I thought, but you know, their children are immaculately conceived. You should love them. But actually, a lot of heterosexual people's families are immaculately conceived now too. So, and these are my. So anyway, I made this giant work which is currently touring the country. These people are heterosexual, as you can see, but they're their two children conceived through IVF. All of the photographs that I took for it are modelled on Renaissance Holy Family portraits, which the paintings themselves are disputed. People argue about whether they're authentic, rather in an analogous way to the arguments around families conceived in new ways, technologically enabled ways. So you can see the works are strangely, amazingly beautiful. I did start off making this work as an argument, but it ended up being quite a prayerful work, I think. I'm sure you've noticed by now that my work's very Catholic, kind of, inside Catholicism in a way. Anyway, a lot of people are in these works, and they turn out to be incredibly beautiful. They're framed in antique round wooden frames. I'm interested in work inside the gallery as well as outside, obviously, because the galleries are our museums of our culture, where we know ourselves historically in images, and so that's an interesting place for me to take an argument to. Anyway, this will be finished in a low moment, and right now I'm doing a big giant work for the Biennale of Sydney, which involves collaborative collages, which are based on portraits of all different kinds of people. And this is just to show you what the collage workshops kind of look like. And in fact, they're not full. So if anybody wanted to participate in any of the collage workshops that I'm running, which would be so fun, they're just starting this Sunday and we'll go 3 times a week until next June. If you go onto the Biennale of Sydney website, you can actually see how to join up if you would like to. I would just like to end by saying I really look forward to your ongoing fellowship in our collective struggle against those 2 little issues that I mentioned before. Thank you.